Oregon State and Washington State are still in the Pac-12, which is still a thing. Did you know this? Did you know that? I'm telling you this for the first time. This is breaking news as reported this week by mercurynews.com that the new commissioner, that's a thing, of the Pac-12, which is also a thing for a little bit, has come out and said, that's Teresa Gould, by the way, that right now the exposure being given to Oregon State and Washington State is a good thing that is benefiting both of those schools. So all you people that are out there like, oh, these shows are all clickbait, blah. The literal Pac-12 commissioner is looking at this jazz and saying, hey, wait a second, that is going to help these two schools in realignment. What is the reasoning for that? Why would Gould say this to Canzano and Wilmer? She said it because in the current state where these two schools are, they need all of the exposure they could possibly get. And what Locked On Big 12 is doing, what Wilner is doing, what Canzano is doing is giving them that kind of exposure. So in her words and her eyes, the past 2025, we don't really know who these two schools are going to play. We don't really know what conference they're going to be in. They have to work out fairly soon what they're going to do post Pac-12. Now, if they leave the Pac-12 prior to August 3rd of 2026, they give away a lot of their assets. But I find it interesting that right now, the rhetoric out of what is left of the Pac-12 is, hey, whoa, wait a second. We understand there's a lot, and she mentions it. We understand there is a lot of misinformation that is going around right now about where Oregon State and Washington State are going to end up. There are a lot of people talking about the ACC. Now, a lot of people talking about the Big 12. What is legit? What is not? To me, I think those two schools have a better shot at landing in the Big 12 because the ACC is just going to try to backfill. And we've already seen how backfill already, like they add Florida, they add Stanford, SMU, and Cal, and immediately Florida State says, yeah, we don't really want to hang around for that. And I can imagine that a conference like that, as they are withering away, ESPN says, look, wait a second, the Big 12 can give us more value with Washington State and Oregon State there. So why not add those two schools to that conference? And if that is the case, as so many people have predicted, I think the Big 12 is in a better spot to land them than the ACC is. That's a moot point. What I like about this rhetoric is we are keeping those two schools at the top of the conversation, and it is almost proving that age-old quote of no publicity is bad publicity. In the current situation those two schools are in, and I want you to think about it. You're a fan of TCU. You're a fan of Oklahoma State. And tomorrow you find out that your school is no longer a power conference school. Of course you freak out because you want to watch college football, and we're not going to really give you the option to watch college football at the same caliber that you have previously. So I don't mind, Mrs. Gould, Teresa, beefing up those two schools, talking about those two schools and giving them publicity and keeping them in the front of the headlines. You're not going to get it from ESPN. You're not going to get it from the New York Times. Those people are not talking about where Oregon State and Washington State are going to end up in realignment. However, if this podcast is, if other Big 12 sources are, if now Brett McMurphy is bringing it up and Ross Dellinger is bringing it up and guys are talking about how the Big 12, MHVER3, can I fun aside here, by the way? That guy, I hope you all know when I mention him or Greg Swaim or Tony Altimore, I hope those names ring a bell for you people. When I bring those up, it's because it sounds funny. Nameless, faceless. Who is this guy on Twitter? Like, what do we, who cares? Why do we value his opinion? However, I think he brings a lot of takes to the table that we should at least consider. And here is what Gould said when she was on a podcast with Canzano and Wilner. She says, all of that buzz on social media and all that interest in the rumor mill and all of that, there certainly is some value in it from the perspective of that means we have communities who care about what we're doing. We want passionate fans across college sports that care about what we're doing. From that perspective, it's good. She goes on to say, the rumors are challenging when they aren't accurate and when there's misinformation out there. At times, it becomes difficult to manage relationships, expectations, anxieties, and all these other things when there's misinformation. It's part of the world we're living in now. The good news is, so there's almost like a but. The good news is I have really strong communication with Washington State and Oregon State, and they are kept well briefed on what's going on and what's not going on. For the moment, the article writes, Gould explains she is spending a lot of time finalizing their 2025 football schedule for those two universities. And she goes on to say, moving forward, regardless of what the scenario is, and there are a lot of different iterations and scenarios out there, will continue to overturn every stone we know of and try to create some stones we don't know of to figure out what scenarios are possible. I don't think there is a foregone conclusion about what is best because we're still evaluating what is possible. This already sounds way better than George Kliavkoff, by the way. Like, that's stunning. Good for her. She's really good, it seems like. And she knows her job now as quasi Pac-12 commissioner is to find a landing spot for those two schools. And the goal would certainly be the Big 12 or the ACC. So that's what the plan of attack is going to be. And I don't think it's cool that she doesn't care. It's cool that she sees the Locked On Big 12 is trying to will these two teams into the Big 12 conference, or at least somewhere. Because I, as someone who have rooted for Baylor and thought that, Baylor would be in the Mountain West 3 years ago, as that guy, I'm with it. I get it. I don't want them to be that. I feel sad for you guys. They're good people on both sides. My ex-girlfriend was a Washington fan. So, big white, and went to TCU. Yeah, I'm a Baylor guy. I don't really tell you guys about my dating life very often, do I? I guess I should if we're friends. And so it makes me love Washington State even more. Go Cougars. Great person. She's a great person. I should mention that too. I just, why not just have that little caveat to give you? Now you know a little bit about me. Tell me about yourself. Comment section. Yeah. I hope they find success. I also, Kyle Whittingham said some stuff again. He keeps saying stuff, man. They give him a microphone and he's like, super conferences. That's the latest from him. He believes that the Big 12, it might have to go away or be pulled away because the SEC and the Big 10 are going to be their own entities, leave the NCAA and create their own college football playoff. And I think it's poppycock. Not today, crazy Uncle Kyle. That's next on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12, joining me on the show. Is this crazy Uncle Kyle, Drake, because he's kind of a lame duck head coach? I think this is going to be his last season at Utah, so he doesn't have to deal with the ramifications of these comments because they'll fade out of the public light. If not after this season, then after next season, you would think, having named his head coach in waiting. Yeah. He has said to 365, he has said to John Canzano that he feels like there's a major realignment move coming. What is he talking about?
Kyle Whittingham says a lot of things. They're not always bad. He's a little on the poppy side, but also isn't the guy who's using social media every day. He's not Lane Kiffin. He's not trying to drum up a bunch of drama. So I usually try to give a little bit more to Kyle Whittingham. I also think he's more strategic than what you get out of Stillwater. Mike Gundy will go to the podium knowing he's going to make a headline, knowing that his I see it as when we got to Big 12 Media Days, Gundy saw Whittingham across the table. It's like, you know what? DUIs aren't that bad. It's like, oh, great, Mike. Yep.
Yeah, that was a decision. That was a decision.
Be like, yeah, 4 or 5 beers. I do that all the time, probably thousands of times. Like, yep, Gundy, you've got the spotlight again. Whittingham, a lot of these conversations date back 10 years to, there was a Bleacher Report article that I stumbled upon today doing and I was studying how crazy is Crazy Uncle Kyle. And there was tension within the program 10 years ago where he was saying some stuff about Utah and they thought they're going to part ways. And then, he named a coach in waiting prior. Like Scally was named their guy around 2020 and then was not the guy anymore. Now he's their guy again. And then a couple of months ago, he comes out and says, I don't even know if we'll be playing BYU in a few years because of expansion. And then when they say, hey, you're playing Miami in 2027, what do you think? And he's like, I won't be here. Great. The dude is just really transparent about things, and he believes that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to create super conferences and maybe leave the NCAA and create their own playoff system. And look, we just got the AP poll, which is in essence the SEC and Big Ten power rankings. Let's just
yes,
the conferences.
It very much is.
Pretty much what you get. There's no Tulane hanging around there. There's no App State. There's zero group of 4, 5, 6, however many of the conferences there are, schools that exist in there. 16 of the teams, I believe it is, come from the Big Ten of the SEC. That's a lot of the teams. And Whittingham's saying those two powerful conferences are becoming even more powerful and have such a gap between them, the Big 12 and the ACC, that they don't really have a reason to stick around. And the NCAA is flubbed. Like the recent lawsuit where the NCAA had just egg all over its face and is now costing those universities a lot of money because of it is something that the SEC and Greg Sankey don't want to put up with anymore. Tony Petitti doesn't want to put up with it anymore, and they might not have to. Kyle Whittingham, good foresight here. I don't disagree with him, though it's kind of wild to come from a Power 5 head coach.
It is, and I thought it was notable that Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports had a response to that comment that if Kyle Whittingham is right, Dennis was saying, well, then you can just tear up all these media rights contracts that everyone just signed that run into the late 2020s or usually into the early part of the 2030s, which, yes, is indeed about a decade or so from now. The idea of a super conference has been floated around before. And to your point on the AP poll, why don't I just go through the top 15 here? I could go to the top 25, but I think top 15 makes the point. SEC, Big Ten, SEC, Notre Dame, Big Ten, ACC. Hey, look, that's Florida State. They're not going to be in the ACC for very long. SEC, Big 12, go Utah, I suppose, and then SEC, and then ACC. Oh, yep, Clemson again. Yeah, they're not going to be there anymore. And SEC. That's the top 15 teams. And this idea that they'd break away, look, I see how it can work. I think the drawbacks are far greater than the benefits such a proposal would bring to college football and bring to college football fans. I am not a fan of the G5 having an automatic bid to the playoff because I don't think anybody should have an automatic bid to the playoff. But what I worry about, barring the introduction of a relegation promotion system, which I would be in favor of if they went to this model, I think you are suddenly pulling away from certain teams, leaving brands behind, and we're going to pick the 40 to 60 most watched or most profitable football and universities that we like, and I think there are a lot of negatives with that.
Yeah, this is the same reason we won't see relegation in college football is the same reason we won't actually see them break away from the NCAA. And that is because of the hoops you got to jump through, the red flags that come with that, the red tape that the NCAA puts up with all the time, the Title IX offices to try to work through revenue deals. And I just don't think the SEC is ready to be the governing body of 16 or 30 or 40 schools when it comes to not just football, but swimming and rowing and track and field. There's still so many sanctioned sports where you go, hey, the NCAA's got a ton of offices and people that are in charge of these things that handle all of that for you. You sign the paperwork and you submit it to the NCAA, and that section of your sport is done. You, the head coach, have reported X, Y, and Z to the NCAA. Now you have to do that to the SEC office. It's not built for that. That's not built to be the governing body of all of college football, all of college softball, all of college basketball. There is too much. You would have to completely reset how you lead it. In relegation, you have to completely reset how you structure your conferences and what that looks like and how travel looks and scheduling looks. There's just too much that those conferences aren't going to want to deal with. So the idea of the Big Ten and the SEC creating their own playoff, I don't know if that's that for him. They've got a good amount of control under right where Charlie Baker is. His whole in his meetings in the last 6 months with those conference commissioners has really been, hey, you guys, in paying student athletes here, like, we're going to give you guys a lot of leeway and autonomy. I wouldn't be shocked if we moved to a different playoff format that really highlights those two conferences. But as far as them leaving the NCAA, Charlie Baker has given them a whole lot of power to try to keep them, and I think it's going to work.
I hope it works because I don't want to see a breakaway where you leave not just the group of 5 teams entirely behind, because if I'm being honest, that's less of my priority, but that you would leave Power 4 schools behind. The Big Ten would say, hey, if we're building a super conference, we're gonna bring these 4 new kids on the block with us. And Indiana, Illinois, Northwestern, Purdue, we don't really want you anymore. And the SEC will say, yeah, Mississippi State and Vanderbilt and Missouri and whoever else we don't really want or need you here. Like that's what I ward against. But I want to close with this, Drake, because you brought up a good point about why you give Kyle Whittingham's comments serious weight, because he is a lame duck, so he doesn't have to deal with the consequences or think about all these sorts of things. But this is not just something he said once and it just kind of went out there and I was like, whoa, what a quote. He has said this twice, that he believes a major realignment shift is coming in the next couple of years. And I tend to be in your camp, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, there are too many hurdles to jump over in the short term. I do think if you want to go way into the future, the middle of the 2030s decade, approaching 2040, by then, if you told me, we have 2 super conferences, everyone's a part of it, and they're divided up into divisions, that I would believe.
Yeah, for sure. And even past 2031, when we start to get more clarity on these TV deals, there's the possibility you see conference realignment almost merge into that without the actual, hey, we're trying to be a super conference. You just see the attrition build something like that. And that might be how we get there eventually. I will wrap by saying I think Kyle Whittingham is one of the great football coaches that exists right now, and is someone that we overlook very often in the national conversation because he's been at Utah so long, even past them being in a power conference. And then when they were, he was really good, and we still didn't talk about him very much. We should talk about him more. And guess what? He doesn't really care. And if he's the kind of guy that tomorrow will be like, hey, Kyle, guess what? Utah out of the Big 12. You're an independent now. He'll go, okay, I quit. he's chill, man. He's like, whatever happens, it's out of my control. It's like, all right, cool. And that's why I think Kyle Whittingham isn't BSing us right now. This is really what he believes. I don't know if he's that far off.
Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12. Great stuff today. Great energy as always. Perhaps the thing I like most about you, along with your cherry red tomato face. I don't know what you were doing earlier. You have a little. It's in this area.
I'm blushing for the ladies
around here. Yeah, let's roll with that.